Hello and welcome. My cat is here, but she's sitting on the corner of my bed staring at me, so I don't know if she'll actually join me so I can do the tail swish. If she does join me, I will do the tail swish. My rats are also up there making a lot of noise. Hi, Ursula. I don't know what they're doing in there. Being cuties, I'm guessing. Cutie patooties. Anyway, so I had a comment on one of my videos recently asking if I could do a video about once you bring rats home, like the first few days after you bring them home, because they were going to be getting rats soon. So first of all, congratulations on your new babies. I hope that they are everything you want them to be. Second of all, yeah, I can absolutely do that video, and that's what this video is going to be. So let's get into it. All right, let's start with when you go and pick them up. When you go pick them up, you're going to want an appropriate carrier to make sure they don't escape. So I do not recommend going and getting those like cardboard like carriers that pet stores use, because rats can chew through that. Nor do I recommend a dog or cat carrier, because baby rats especially, they're going to be able to squeeze through those. And then you have a loose rat in your car that's terrified, and it's going to be very hard to get them. So my recommendation for carriers is something like this. You can get this style of carrier online on Amazon. It's called Living World. And this is what I mostly use. But if you want more of a pet store option, you can get this from Petco, or not Petco, sorry, PetSmart. And this also works really well. This is nice and big, but is not, in my opinion, as secure as the Living World one. But I haven't had any issues with it so far because I don't leave rats unattended in this. Or if you don't want that style of carrier, you can go and get a small hamster cage. And this also works really well for traveling with your rats. And just make sure that the bar spacing is 0.5 inches, because otherwise they might be able to squeeze out. And then again, you have a loose rat in your car that is terrified, and that's just not going to end well for anyone. Hi, June June. You guys see Junie? Next, let's talk about their cage. So before you go pick them up, before you do anything, you're going to want to have their cage set up before they come home, because otherwise they're going to be having to wait in the carrier while you set it up, and they're already stressed, and it's best to get them into the cage so they can decompress in peace. I personally set up my cage the day before I go get them, unless I'm busy that day, and then I'll do it like a couple days before. But I try not to do it the day of, because that's just an added stress that I don't need. And you will want their cage to be pretty full, but if you're nervous that they're going to be shy, I suggest keeping it as an open layout. So basically, don't give them any hides. Provide lots of open baskets. Instead of doing like a bunk bed hammock, try a flat hammock. That sort of thing. Okay. Well, I promised I'd do it, so. You don't want them to be able to go into anything and hide so that you are forced to like pull them out, because that is just very stressful for them, and it can be very unnerving for you as well. And so if you just want to hedge your bets and have a more open layout, you can do that. I will say it's going to depend on the rats. Not all rats are going to immediately want to hide and not want to interact with you at all, but some will, especially if they're from like a rescue situation, they haven't been handled a lot or something like that. Or if they're from a pet store, you know, that kind of thing. They're not as used to human interaction as rats from a breeder or rehoming situation, so they probably will want to hide. And I just personally like to make sure that they like get used to me moving around. They can't just tuck themselves away. They have to see me moving around. As for the cage itself, some people say that it's better to put babies into a smaller cage, and some people just toss them straight into like a double critter nation and say, have at it. I've done both. If you're getting your first rats, then I can understand not wanting to start with a smaller cage when you're just gonna have to upgrade it very shortly afterward, and you just want to start with your critter nation or critter nation type cage if you choose to go with a cage that's this tall or this tall, what have you. And in that situation, I find that this cage is actually pretty fine for Hi Chun. I find that single story critter nation isn't that bad for babies, like for as a baby cage, especially if they're standards. I put the Grabies in one of these. I put my older dwarf trio in one of these when I first got them. I have my new babies in a single story. I find that it's fine. It's that I never noticed much of a difference except for with my rats Willow and Welsie, who were from a rescue. And Willow was fine, Welsie was not. It was a big change for her. And so even though she came from a house with a double critter nation, putting her into a single story critter nation just kind of freaked her out, even though she was used to that space. But she did come around. I've also put my rats into a double critter nation when I first got them. So a few years ago, I've talked about this a couple times, I got 7 babies a week apart from each other. And I did not have the cage space to keep them in small cages. So basically the first 3 I got, which were Warren, Orville, and Hex, I just popped them right into the critter nation, and I just made sure everything that they needed was going to be very close at hand so that they could explore the cage on their own terms. I did not try to force it, so I just made sure, basically, I put everything within a short distance of their hide, because I did give them a hide. They were very social, so it was fine. And over the course of the next couple of weeks, before I did intros, they did slowly kind of start exploring the cage, but it took them a while to get all the way to the bottom. But they never had a problem with me, and I never tried to force them to explore more of the cage than they were comfortable with. I always put them back where I had gotten them and let them explore on their own. And I do somewhere have a clip of when I had put all the babies into their fully decked out critter nation, so 7 baby rats going absolutely ham on a double critter nation. And if I can find that clip, I'll pop it up here because it was a sight to see. I remember standing there just being like, oh, this was maybe a mistake. But if you want to go with a smaller cage, there are a few options. There's the Preview 528, which would work great for a baby cage for some standard size rats. It can also be a permanent cage for a small group of dwarfs, no more than 3, I'd say. Technically it is big enough for up to 2 standard size rats, and I think that's not the worst option if you're very tight on space. But the Preview also makes another cage called the Ranch Cage, which is good for up to 3 standard size rats, and I think that would work really well as a permanent cage, and you can just set it up on a dresser. It's about the same length as a critter nation, but it is shorter. So it has a lot of floor space, but it isn't like as oppressive as this cage because you can just pop it up onto a dresser. Or you can go with, if you want a smaller cage, this is technically a smaller cage, you can just go with a single story critter nation. The one thing you want to make sure is that your cage, whatever you go with, has 0.5 inch bar spacing, or they can escape, and you want to make sure if they have a plastic bottom that you are keeping a close eye on the rats, because rats can chew through plastic bottoms even if there's the tiniest little ledge. I have had this happen. I had some baby rats that I had in this was an old cage. It was called a PetSmart rat starter cage, and it was, you know, one of those ones with a plastic bottom that's like this tall, and you put the bars on top of it, and they chewed through the bottom of that in about 2 weeks. So keep that in mind. I have not had any issues with my Preview so far, though. Next, let's talk about food. So when I'm getting baby rats, I like to put the food in before I leave so that I can put them in and there's food available. Because typically, even if you're getting from someone fairly close to you, a lot of times the breeder won't have fed them their normal food that day. So they haven't eaten, a lot of times they're pretty hungry, and baby rats go through a lot of food. They need a lot of food to grow. So I like to just put some food in before I leave, and that way when I put them in the cage, once they're done exploring, or if they're scared, they know that it's there. They know they have the option. And the other thing with baby rats is that it is recommended that you give them an unlimited amount of food up to, and these numbers are a little wiggy. I've heard 12 weeks, I've heard 14 weeks, and I've heard 16 weeks. I personally do 14 weeks. I find that works really well for my rats. And by unlimited amount of food, basically you're just not measuring it. You're just taking a scoop, however much you feel is appropriate, and scattering it on the ground. And then I would just, I'll go check on them. I'll see how much food is there. And if like after an hour it's all gone, I will increase the amount I give them until like it lasts at least a couple of hours, because again, they're growing, they're very hungry. And it's best for them to have an unlimited access so that they can grow nice and strong. I would also recommend at least checking to see what kind of diet they were on before, because if they're being fed a pelleted diet, there's really no harm in switching them over to a like Shunamite dry mix immediately. But if they're not used to getting a lot of fruits and veggies, it can mess with their tummy a little bit. I still give them mine, but they don't always eat them if they're not used to getting fruits and veggies. Now, this isn't necessarily a problem with most breeders. Most breeders will give fruits and veggies. But if you're getting from a rescue or a pet store or even rehoming situations, sometimes they're not used to it. And the high water content, especially in the leafy greens, can just like really mess with their tummy a little bit, and it will correct itself pretty quickly, but it is something you want to keep an eye on. Next, let's talk about interacting with your rats, how quickly you should after bringing them home. So this is one of those things that has a lot of differing opinions on it. I've seen people say you should leave them alone for 3 full days. I've seen people say you should leave them alone for 2 days, 1 day, and I've seen some people say that you should interact with them immediately so they don't develop cage aggression. And I've seen some people say that you should judge based on how confident the rat is. And I feel like there is no right answer, to be perfectly honest. I wouldn't leave them alone for 3 days. I do kind of feel like that's ridiculous. Rats adjust pretty fast, and they don't need very long to decompress most of the time. There are some cases with like rescues where they need to decompress for longer, but you leaving them alone for 3 full days just means that they're going to start the stress process all over again when you start interacting with them. So for me, what I typically do is when I bring them home, I leave them alone for the night, not necessarily for them, but for me, because I'm usually very exhausted. And usually it is pretty late at night when I get home. So it's just like I let them decompress. I do whatever chores I need to get done. I'll go in so that I can get pictures of them because I want pictures of them the first night I have them. Maybe do a couple of clips for videos. But for the most part, I just leave them alone for that night. And the next day, I start interacting with them immediately. Now, I know it can be a little scary to hear that you should interact with them day 1 so they don't develop cage aggression or become territorial over their cage. And I would not personally worry about that too much, especially if you're getting babies. If your rat develops cage aggression, it's probably going to happen regardless of when you start interacting with them. If you don't interact with them for like months and then you start trying to, chances are, yeah, they're going to be a little bit more territorial over their cage depending on where they're from, their temperament, that kind of thing. But even then, it's not necessarily a guarantee. Rescues end up with a lot of rats that don't have a lot of human interaction and they are not getting bit or hissed at or anything like that when they're near the cage. The rats I have experience with that have had very mild cage aggression, honestly, there was Sunny, and she had hormonal aggression. After she was spayed, she was mostly fine, except for when specifically someone who was not me stood by her cage, and then she would hiss at them and she'd get very angry. But she didn't do that with me. And that is one reason I do think you should interact with your rat sooner rather than later, because ultimately the only way your rat is going to get used to you and the only way you're going to bond with them is by interacting with them, which means playing with them inside the cage, take them out of the cage, holding them, petting them. You okay? What was that? Holding them, petting them, playing with them, free roaming with them, because I have had many situations where my rats will react differently to me than they do to other people. So like Sunny, for example, she would hiss at like other people who stood near a cage, but she never did that with me. And then my friend Cappy, her rats, let's go with her rat Wicket, for example. She was the sweetest rat with me and Cappy, and she had her sister Wookie, and she loved Wookie and was super sweet with Wookie. And then we had to take her in to have a lump removed, and she tried to bite most of the vet techs. And it's like, you become special to your rat in the same way that they are special to you. If you form a bond that is built on trust and like positive interactions, that rat's going to feel very strongly about you. And if you don't interact with them, if you don't try, they're not going to feel very strongly about you. On one hand, there's the argument, well, it's not good that Wicket had me and Cappy as her exceptions and then was biting other people. We should have known about that behavior a lot sooner. But on the other hand, she could have very easily gone her entire life without ever having to worry about it. It was only that she needed a lump removed and she was getting spayed anyway, and we found out. So like Cappy's other rat, Grant, was very similar, where she never ever tried to bite Cappy, but she would try to bite me and she would try to bite strangers. Cappy was the exception, and it never really affected Grant's life because she had Cappy and she had her sisters and she was fine with other rats. So Grant was fine because she was able to interact at least with one person safely. You see what I'm saying? So it is important, in my opinion, to try and form that bond pretty quickly, especially since I find that the longer you wait, the longer it's going to take the rat to get used to you. It's better to get them used to you when they're young than waiting for them to calm down. Because I have Blooper, for example. When I first got her, she was very, very unsure of me. She would freak out anytime I tried to interact with her. And I'd say after a couple of days of handling her, she became very comfortable with me. But if I had waited and I had let her feel like she didn't have to worry about me when I did start handling her, she would have not been as cool with it. So in conclusion, handle them when you feel comfortable handling them. The argument about seeing how confident the rats are, I again find it's not a bad argument, but if you're new to rats, you're not necessarily going to know the difference between a confident rat and a shy rat. But also sometimes when they are coming home to you for the first time, it's going to take a little bit for their personality to come out. Junimo and Jojo, for example. Junimo, who is no longer my little assistant, but she was shy the first like 48 hours that I had her, and then she got comfortable with me because I would take her out, I was playing with her and stuff, and she was like, okay, you're not so bad. Keep in mind, Junimo is a dwarf rat, so she was like, I'd have to look up the exact grams, but she was like 70 some grams when I got her or something like that. And she was very shy because she was very small, and then when she realized that I just wanted to pet her and play with her, she immediately came out of her shell and she was all over the place. She was crazy. Which I liked, thankfully. But anyone who was handling her that first day would have been like, I think she's a shy rat, and then they wouldn't have handled her, and it would have taken her longer to come out of her shell. So what I like to do is the second day that I have them, so I let them decompress overnight, and the next day I pouch them. Basically, I don't have one on me. Hold on. I have a designated hammock that's a pocket hammock, so it's kind of like this. This isn't that one, but, you know. And I stick the rats in the pouch and I sit with them and I pet them, and that's when I gauge their confidence. Because if they're constantly trying to come out of the pouch and explore, that's when I'll try to start moving them up to a free roam setup. But I do wait until they do that, because if I try to do free roam before they're comfortable with me, collecting them to put them back in the cage can be very, very difficult. Lastly, let's talk about free roam. So the thing with free roam and new rats is until you have a bond, it can be difficult to get them back to the cage. So I do controlled free roams. So basically, once they're done with the pouch, I move them onto either a small table, very small, or a shelf, and then I just slowly increase the space until we're in my normal free roam space. That way, once I start needing to take them back into the cage, they're more used to me interacting with them, and when I pick them up, they're okay with it. And I've seen some people be like, how do you keep them on the shelf? They just want to like go and explore. And it's like, well, I keep them on the shelf. If they look like they're going to exit my designated spot, I nudge them back gently. And then when they're like safely in the spot, I give them a treat. So they associate that space with treats. And then I give them a treat when I take them back to the cage as well. So they associate going back to their cage with a treat. And since my rats like their cage, it's a double win, because my rats do view their cages as their... Hi, Bake. Hi, buddy. What are you doing? Hi, can I get a kiss? He's like, this isn't a treat. What are you doing? So they're like going back to the cages after free roam. They get excited for free roam, and then they get excited to be put back after free roam. And it's a win-win. So I do recommend slowly increasing the free roam space as you build your bond. And free roam will really help you with your bond as well, because rats like free roam. It's fun for them. And if you're there with them, then you become part of that fun. So I do recommend doing free roam when you can, and just interacting with them a lot, because that is where a lot of your bond is going to come from. All right, well, I hope that was helpful information for everybody. And if you are getting new rats soon, I hope they're everything you want them to be. I hope they're sweet little babies, and I hope you enjoy them as much as I love my rats. And yeah, so I hope you liked this video. If you did, you know what to do. All the fun stuff down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.